Hello, students. Have you ever wondered how we manage all the different, resources on our planet? It actually starts with a very simple but powerful idea, classification. Today, we are going to explore what that means and why it's so important for our shared future. So, to guide us today, we will follow this roadmap. First, we'll start with the why. Why do we even need to classify resources? Then, we will look at the different ways we do it, by where they come from, how long they will last, who owns them, and how ready we are to use them. And finally, we'll connect all these ideas to see how it shapes our future. All right, let's start with something we all do every day. Before we talk about big things like minerals and forests, just think about this. Why do we organize things? Why do you put your books on a shelf in a certain way or separate your clothes in a cupboard? Well, it's all about making sense of things, isn't it? We organize to understand and to use things more effectively. Now, what if I told you that this same simple idea applies to something as huge and complex as our planet's resources? And this is how it all comes together. This chart you see here, it's like our map for today's lesson. It shows us the different ways we can classify resources. We're going to walk through each of these main categories to really understand what they mean. Okay, so now that we have our map, let's begin our journey. Our first stop is classification by origin. In simple words, where do our resources actually come from? This is the most basic way to understand them. From this point of view, we have two main types. On one side, we have biotic resources. These are the living parts of our world, anything that comes from the biosphere and has life. And on the other side, we have abiotic resources. These are all the non-living things that make up our planet. Let's look at some examples to make it clearer. For biotic resources, we're talking about everything from plants and animals, that's flora and fauna, to fisheries and livestock. And yes, that includes us. Human beings are also a biotic resource. Now, for the abiotic side, think of the very foundation of our planet, things like rocks, metals, water, and minerals. So we have seen that resources can be living or non-living, but that is only one part of the story. The next important question is, how long will they be around for us to use? And that brings us to our next classification, by exhaustibility. Here, again, we have two types. Renewable resources are those that can be renewed or reproduced. But non-renewable resources, they are very different. They are formed over millions and millions of years, a very, very slow process. We hear about renewable resources all the time, don't we? Things like solar and wind energy, water, forests, and wildlife. On the other side, we have the non-renewables, fossil fuels like coal and petroleum, and also minerals. Once we use them up, they are gone for a very, very long time. Now, this is a very important point we must be careful about. It's a common mistake to think that renewable means infinite. That's not always true. Even resources like our groundwater or our forests can be finished if we are not careful and do not use them in a sustainable way. So, we must be mindful of how we use all our resources, renewable or not. Now let's add another layer to our understanding, ownership. Who actually has the right to use these resources? This is very important because it decides who gets to make the decisions. We can break down ownership into four main types. First, we have individual resources, things that are owned privately, like a farmer's land or your own house. Then we have community-owned resources, which can be used by everyone in a community, like village ponds or public parks. On a bigger scale, we have national resources, everything within a country's boundaries, like minerals, rivers, and even railways. And finally, there are international resources, which are regulated by international bodies, like the resources in the deep ocean. So ownership can be individual, community, national, or even international. Now, let's come to our final classification, the status of development. This is all about one simple question. Are we ready to use these resources yet? This tells us not just what we have today, but what might be possible tomorrow. Here we have four interesting categories. First, potential resources. These are resources we know exist in a region, but we haven't started using them fully. For example, the huge potential for wind and solar energy in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Then we have developed resources. These are the ones we have surveyed, we know their quantity and quality, and we are using them right now. Third, we have stock. This is interesting. These are resources that could help us, but we just don't have the right technology to access them. And finally, reserves. These are part of the stock that we can use with today's technology, but we have decided to save them for the future. Now, this difference between stock and reserves is very important, so let's understand it slowly. With stock, the problem is technology. For example, we know that water is made of hydrogen and oxygen, and hydrogen is a great source of energy. but we do not have the proper technology to use it in a big way, so it is a stock. With reserves, it's a choice. We have the technology, say, to build more dams on rivers for hydropower, but we are choosing to save that water for future use. Let's try to make it even simpler. Think of stock as a treasure in a locked box, but we don't have the key to open it. We know the treasure is inside, but we can't get it. Yet. Reserves, on the other hand, are like a treasure in a box that we can open. We have the key, but we have decided to keep it safe and use it later. So, we have explored the different ways we classify resources by their origin, their exhaustibility, their ownership, and their status of development. But what is the point of all this? That brings us to the really big question. Why does all of this matter for our future? The answer is actually very simple, but very important. Classifying resources is the very first and most essential step for using them wisely, for their judicious use and development. It is the foundation for everything else. And you can see exactly why on this slide. Classification helps us with proper planning, making sure we use our resources in a balanced and wise way. It is so important for conservation, helping us protect our resources from being wasted or overused. And it is the basis for sustainable development, the idea of meeting our own needs today without taking away from the needs of our future generations. So, as we have seen today, understanding our resources is much more than just learning facts. It is about taking the first, most important step towards protecting our planet for everyone, for our common future.